Welcome to Addiction 101, Understanding Lived Experience and the Science to Prevent Overdose. My name is Merlene Tucker, and I'll be running today's web forum along with my colleague Jeff Bornstein. This web forum is sponsored by the National Overdose Prevention Network and produced by Dialogue for Health, both programs of PHI Center for Health, Leadership, and Impact. The support for this webinar series was made possible through funding from the California Healthcare Foundation. Now let's meet the moderator of today's event, Dr. Carmen Rita Nevares. Carmen is a senior advisor at PHI Center for Health, Leadership, and Impact, founder of Dialogue for Health, and senior vice president emeritus of External Relations and Preventive Medicine at the Public Health Institute. Welcome, Carmen.
Thank you, Merlene, and welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this very important first in a series. Are unaffected by substance use and addiction in America. In fact, it's 1 out of 4 children, which is nearly 19 million children that live with at least one parent with a substance use disorder. Over 321,000 children lost a parent to a drug overdose between 2011 and 2021. Nearly a third of Americans reported in a 21 Gallup poll that drugs have caused a problem in their family. 9% of people have been married to or lived with someone who had an alcohol use disorder at some point in their life. This is a lot of people. This is a lot of us. This is a lot of our community. Today's webinar kicks off a very special series intended to help build knowledge and understanding about substance use disorder, how it can change your life, and more importantly, what can be done to address it. We'll bring you the moving personal story of how substance use destroyed one person's life and career and how he has rebuilt himself through his recovery process. Then we'll spend some time with an expert who's guided many people through recovery and will help us to understand addiction from a medical point of view and how treatment works. In future sessions in this series, we'll look at what prevention strategies work and what has been the experience of communities who organize to provide more outreach, prevention, and other services to their community members suffering from substance use disorder, and how communities can organize to address the issues that they face. Let me also take a moment to thank the California Healthcare Foundation for their generous support in helping us to reach and engage a larger audience to talk about this important issue. And we wanted you to know that there's a guide that we're going to provide you a link to in the chat right now and then at the end. And this is Overdose Prevention 101. There's also a version that we've developed for rural communities as well. So please take advantage of these guides. Take advantage of coming back to our website, downloading or linking up to the session we're doing today, which is being recorded, and share it. Share it as broadly as you need. Come back to us and see if there's any way in which we can help you to educate your community. Plus, tell us what you need to know. Tell us what's really providing the most concern for your community members. Tell us what you would like in this series. We've got 6 webinars, and we hope that we will be able to cover as much as possible in this series. So today, throughout the webinar, we encourage your comments, reactions, and your questions. Please post your questions in the Q&A section of your screen, and we will have as well a very extended Q&A session at the end with a lot of back and forth to hear from our speakers. So let me get the session started and introduce our speakers. Frank Kensaku Ken Zaragoza was once a tenured American literature professor, but alcoholism and substance use disorder destroyed his career. He spent years as a methamphetamine addict, leading to homelessness and multiple prison stints. Today, he is an award-winning author in recovery and inspires people to convey compassion for those going through addiction, homelessness, criminality, and incarceration. He is a teaching artist for Playwrights Project, which takes playwriting classes into jails in San Diego County and at California state prisons. With them, he taught at-risk young people in the juvenile court and community schools, and he's taught adults at Father Joe's villages. After he shares his story, We'll hear from Ariana Campbell, who is an emergency department and addiction medicine specialist, holding degrees as a DMSC, a master's in public health, and a physician's assistant with over 25 years of experience. She serves as a senior director and principal investigator for Bridge, a program which she co-founded. She works clinically in emergency and addiction psychiatry at the VA Medical Center in Sacramento and leads addiction programming at Marshall Medical Center in Placerville, California. Ariana is a current president-elect of the California Academy of Physician Assistants, a member of ASAM's Presidential Task Force, and a board member for the Society of Physician Assistants in Addiction Medicine. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the microphone over to Ken, who will share his story with us. Ken.
Thank you so much for the invitation to share my experiences in addiction and recovery. I really want to thank Carmen, Veronica, Amy, Merlene, Jeff, all the people who put this together, this webinar, and also this series. And I also would just like to say it's really an honor to be here with Dr. Campbell. I'm looking forward to this. Unfortunately, when I saw that little poll and the range of expertise and experience you bring from across all sectors, I have to admit I got a little bit scared. I don't have any of that, but I do have my story. So I guess that's what I'm going to bring to the table. My addiction to crystal meth led me to being homeless in downtown San Diego for close to 4 years. It ended in 2020 when I was arrested at the US-Mexico border for trying to bring several pounds of crystal meth into the United States. I was what the criminal courts in the Southern District of California call a body carrier. Many body carriers, people who walk across the border with drugs in or on our bodies, are addicted and unhoused. This is a crime committed only by the most impoverished and the most desperate. My meth use took me to the streets and then to prison. But my life is more than my addiction and my crimes. I was a college professor for 15 years. I was raised in a Buddhist household, and as an adult, I've been very involved in my spiritual community. I say this because my addiction and my crimes do not define me. I have done some things I really regret, but I've also done things I'm proud of. Every drug addict I know, no matter how lost in addiction, still lived whole lives. Every one of us, in our own way, we were just doing our best. And unfortunately, for many of us, our best just wasn't very good. In my opinion, addiction does not discriminate. Many addicts were raised by addicted parents in addicted homes, but some of us weren't. Many of us grew up in and out of juvenile detention and in the foster system, but I grew up in a middle-class suburb in a 2-parent household with parents who loved me very much. Many addicts never had fair access to education or opportunity, but I did. Addiction does not discriminate. Addiction doesn't give a damn where you grew up, who your parents were, or where you went to school. I lost my academic career due to my addiction back in 2005. And in 2006, I got sober and I stayed sober. Then, one night in 2015, after 9 years of sobriety, I got high again. I'll spare you the details, except to say that deep down inside, I thought one time can't hurt. And then after this one night, I'd get right back into recovery. But I forgot something very basic. I'm an addict, and part of the symptomology of that disease is that I don't get to decide how long I'll use. I don't know when I'll stop or what the consequences will be. When I made the decision to get high that night, I had no idea that a year later I would be homeless. I'd been sober for 9 years, so I knew about recovery. Why did I use? And after not using for years, why couldn't I stop? I tried everything. I went into treatment programs. I sought spiritual counsel. I was in therapy. I went to many support groups and self-help groups, but I could not stop using. The first time I got sober, I was in over my head. I was sliding down a mud hole, trying desperately to grab hold of something, but I had no idea what was happening. This time was much more terrifying because I knew exactly what was happening and what would come next. I felt like I was the engineer in a train that was barreling out of control, but I had no control over the steering or the brakes. All I could do was watch everything go off the rails and explode. Like I said, within a year, I lost the condo where I was living and wound up unhoused in downtown San Diego. I was sure I was going to die, addicted and on the streets. I lived with the reality of overdose for years. Living unhoused in a community of other unhoused addicts, overdose was just a part of that life. As a rule, I did not use heroin or fentanyl, but I OD'd twice. Once because I knowingly mixed a little bit of heroin and crystal meth, and another time when I thought I was using meth, but there was some fentanyl mixed in it. Nobody was able to get me up until someone administered Narcan. Everybody knows homeless drug addicts are at great risk of dying from overdose, and I know some of them personally. I knew their names. I joked with them, argued with them, avoided some of them, and loved hanging out with others. I also know people who died from other things. One person died because of sepsis that was so far gone that by the time an ambulance came, it was too late. Another friend died of exposure in San Diego. It was one of those wet, drizzly, cold nights. He got high, fell out, and he wasn't dressed for overnight cold, and he didn't have anything to cover him, and was so out that the wet and the cold did not wake him up. That night, he died of exposure. There are lots of deaths that aren't considered overdose, but all of these people would be alive, but for the fact that they got high one too many times. I'm a writer, and I write a lot about life on the streets. If it's okay, I want to read something that I wrote. In it, when I refer to black, I mean black tar heroin, which used to be everywhere until fentanyl took over. It's written in the voice of someone addicted and living on the streets, so the language is pretty rough. I hope you won't be too offended. Everyone I know who does black ODs on the regular. I don't mean a lot of people. I mean every single person I know who does black ODs at some point. Lips turning blue, face turning gray, not waking up, not responding, has to be Narcan. Try everything to get him up. Not talking, get him up. Paramedics may be called. Every single friend I have almost died. Not once, but like once a month, or at least once in a while. Like it is the most normal thing in the world if you shoot up black, which is why Needle Exchange passes out Narcan, which is why I keep Narcan on me, because I had it on me when motherfuckers needed it. And when we didn't have it, we poured water on their faces or screamed in their ears or hit them and slapped them and punched them, anything to get them breathing, get them talking, get them up. People hate when you Narcan them because you go from being high as fuck, riding these waves of bliss and oblivion, and then wham, you're back, eyes blinking, gasping for air, not high. And then bam, you're dope sick. You're alive, but not high. And the only reason you live is to get high. And now you're getting sick because Narcan causes withdrawals. And everyone's in your face about how you almost died. And you're pissed because they ruined your high. And that was all the black you had. And you're dope sick. And it's these motherfuckers' fault. It's like if you didn't OD once in a while, you weren't doing it right. Like you weren't serious about getting high. Like if word got around that someone bought some black from this dude and he OD'd and maybe even died, and maybe especially if he died, then everyone wanted to get dope from that guy because that must be the good shit, especially if someone died. Like it sucked that whoever it was died, but man, that dope must be good shit because that motherfucker had mad tolerance. So if this shit killed him, it must be good fucking shit. And nobody says that, but everybody thinks it. Like nobody wants to die, but when you do dope the way we do dope, it's hard to get high, to get really fucking high. So getting as close as you can to dying without dying is gonna be a killer fucking high. This isn't pretty, but it is the truth for some of the most badly addicted people. Nobody wants to live like that. But for some of us, our addiction progressed to that point. Sometimes I hear people who seem to think that addicts are just doing it because we're having fun. But if anyone thinks we were out there having fun, they are dead wrong. We were living the worst consequences of our addiction, and still we couldn't stop. By the time we become unhoused, we've already lost everything. When it comes to using, we're all in. The only reason we live is to get high, and overdose just comes with the territory. I don't say this to reinforce stereotypes about drugged out maniacs and homeless people. There are unhoused people who aren't addicted, and unhoused addicts are not the only people dying from overdose. But it was my experience. Unhoused people aren't pretty. We don't cut sympathetic figures. We look like the authors of our own destruction. I'm Buddhist, but some of you who are Christian probably know what I mean when I say we should look at the perspective of the least of these. I think it's worth understanding addiction from the perspective of the most badly addicted out there. I hurt and destroyed not every relationship I had. I disappointed people I love. I betrayed my values. I destroyed my integrity. On my way to homelessness, I lost my car, my credit, my life savings, my retirement. I lost all the writing I'd ever done, every paper, every notebook, every single thing I thought was important enough to save, a lifetime of work. Not only did I lose my career, I lost many of the most productive years of my life, decades, to addiction, homelessness, and incarceration. I was physically injured many times. I was hit by a car crossing the street. I was assaulted and beaten up and robbed more times than I can count, sometimes at gunpoint or facing a blade. I woke up multiple times in a hospital because of overdose, sepsis, or because I was found incoherent and unresponsive at a trolley. And I contracted HIV and Hep C because of my drug use. I'm now living with a chronic and serious heart condition caused by my meth use. That's just what life is like. For when you're as badly addicted as I was, these aren't extraordinary occurrences. I know many people who have experienced much worse than me and for much longer. Addicts who live on the streets can go to some very sad, very ugly, very dangerous and violent places. Honestly, right now, I cannot tell you why I'm here talking to you and not dead of an overdose or still out there on the streets. I'm not leading a dangerous, violent, or criminal life. I'm not wandering the streets of San Diego or Tijuana lost in psychosis. Any of these things are likely outcomes for someone like me. It says something about how bad it was that I feel fortunate that my addiction took me to prison. In your work, you deal with people who look to be beyond help, and that has to be dispiriting. You work with people exactly like I was. I'm sure there are times when doctors and nurses in emergency departments wonder what is the point of saving this addict's life when you'll probably see them in just a week or two. One time, I went to the ED because I'd been hit by a car that was going about 30 miles an hour. I was flipped into the air and landed on my left shoulder, which was dislocated and broken into two places. I was being wheeled into surgery and I was stopped. I heard a doctor say, "There's no point. He's homeless." When I asked about that later, I was told I misheard, but I wasn't sedated yet. I know what I heard. The thing is, I don't blame him. How was I going to recuperate? Where was I going to go? If I'd had that surgery and gone back to the streets and started using again, there's no way I could have recovered safely. I can't imagine how hard it must be to go back to work every day to deal with a problem that seems unsolvable. I think about all the doctors and nurses and case managers and therapists and drug counselors and attorneys and sheriffs and police who have been a part of my story. And the vast majority of them have no idea what happened to me. After I was found incoherent at a trolley station, I woke up the next day at Grossmont Hospital, now UCSD, and I remember the nurse there was so kind to me, so caring, genuinely concerned for my well-being. Another time, I went to the McAllister detox and left after 5 days to go get high. But the counselors there did their best for me. I still remember them. I guess what I'm trying to say is that many people tried to help me, and maybe they think they failed. They have no idea what happened. They only know I left to go get high. I hope maybe some of them are here right now. Many of you tried to help people, and you don't have a clue what happened to them, and maybe you suspect the worst. But let me speak on behalf of that person who you don't know what happened to. Thank you. What you do makes a difference. What you do matters. Despite all appearances, it mattered to me. I was released from prison in September of 2022, 3 years ago. Since then, work I've done about life on the streets has been published, and my work has earned me some awards and some artistic fellowships. When I was released, I was in my mid-50s with no family and no resources. And now I have a new life as a writer. There was a time when I was certain I was beyond help and that I would die addicted and alone on the streets. And yet I'm here talking to you. I used to think that it was possible to be so badly damaged you could never recover. But now I believe that no matter how bad things get, as long as I'm alive, I have a shot. If I'm alive, there's hope. I think that's the point. If someone is still alive, there is hope they might recover. But that's the thing. People have to survive. What we do as addicts is heartbreaking. Nobody knows if or when or how things will change, but they can. People can change. Recovery is possible. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for all the work that you do.
I want to thank you for that incredible story. I uh, I think you shouldn't feel even for a second that your experiences in life and your ability and your generosity to share that back with us isn't an education which is just invaluable for us, for those of us who haven't been addicted, for those of us who haven't been on the street, and for those of us who have never felt the complete domination of our lives by this by a substance that we can't control. You just gave us such a really incredible vivid story that sticks to the bones. And it just, it's the kind of thing that when somebody can articulate that back to us, it makes such a difference in helping us to know that something can change, that people's lives can change, that we can do better. So I want to thank you. And I know our audience is thanking you as you're seeing all the hearts and all that thank yous go up. Um, there's just nothing like it. Thank you for educating us. Okay. So Ariana, I'm going to pivot to you, and I know this is not, it's not going to be easy to follow, but I know that you can help us to get grounded in what your experience has been really truly as an incredible expert and somebody who works with this issue every day from the other side. Somebody who can help us see how to understand the experience and how to respond in a way that's even more effective than anything we've done so far.
Well, thank you so much. And Ken, I just have to say I'm so moved by where you've landed your experience. And um, I think in medicine, I'll just say that um, I didn't do the right thing for 17 years, and now I do. And for the last 8, 9 years of my career. And so I follow what Maya Angelou said, which is do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. So that's what I'm trying to do. So thank you. Um, I am going to start out just by really, I will admit what Ken experienced in the emergency department not too long ago was a norm, and it's completely unacceptable. To hear that, and what he did here, I'm sure was true. And so I have with others, with all of my partners at Bridge, we and other amazing heroes across the country have set out to do better. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about something I've done in my own community to level set on what's going on, because so many of us didn't have any training in what addiction is, what that looks like, what's happening with people, and to know that there's a way out. And so I'm going to try to level set that to really relate Ken's story to what we all can be doing and how we can share our knowledge with people who need help. So let me see here. All right. First, I'm just going to, so often, I don't know, I'm not sure if we've highlighted this enough. Overdose is our number one public health problem. Ken has lost friends. I've lost family. More Americans die under the age of 45 from overdose than any other cause. And we have to treat this as the crisis it is. And so I'm so grateful what we have almost 400 people here today to learn more. And so we can have an understanding so that we can help people find a way out. And that's the way we can get through this, is together and having a shared understanding. So I just really want to highlight this and know that this is an urgent public health problem and something that's treatable. And, Ken alluded to this, but fentanyl is driving overdose deaths. We've also seen increases in overdoses associated with methamphetamine, cocaine, and we have also saw leveling into 2023 and then a decrease last year. And so I hear people talking about the decrease in overdose deaths, but we're just getting to pre-pandemic overdose deaths, and it was unacceptable then. So I started a program way back in 2016, 2017, recognizing what we were seeing in practice and doing something about it. And it was completely unacceptable then. And so we have a lot of work to do. We cannot rest on our heels and say we see a decrease. We have to do more. And I am going to take some personal ownership here. I have been practicing since 1999, so for a long time. And we, at one point in 2012, we gave out 24 billion, the equivalent of 24 billion 10 milligram hydrocodone tablets in the United States. So there was a prescription for every American out there in 2012. We exposed a massive amount of the American population to opioids. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that can look like. And then what we did, which seemed to make sense at the time. Again, there's a lot of people doing important work, but we thought it was as simple as turning the faucet off. We're just going to stop prescribing. So then 14 billion fewer pills, right, by 2021. This massive turning off the faucet. And then I asked, did that help, right? Of course, we know we need to stop prescribing. We need to stop exposing Americans to opioids when it's not necessary. But at the same time, we saw this massive increase in overdose deaths. We've seen 1 million people die of overdoses. These are our friends, these are our family members. More than 2/3 of the American population knows somebody who died from an overdose. So we have to question what we're doing. And one of the very simple steps that I took when I changed my practice was I looked at what I was doing and asked, am I doing something right now I'm so proud of that I wouldn't make a practice change? And the answer was no. And then I set out to make change and to understand addiction in a different way. And we just know this is really prevalent. I think this is a massive undercount, but about 46 million Americans, or about 15% of the population, has a substance use disorder. Ken is not alone, and we need to do better. We need to make treatment more accessible and normalize conversations about this. So people often ask, well, okay, can we just keep people from using drugs? And of course, we always want to move upstream. I did a lot of work in public health and continue to do this. We always want to move upstream. But I just have to recognize that human beings want to feel better. So there is, as far back as we can find remains of humans, we find remnants of cannabis seeds, opium poppies, magic mushrooms, right? We found these alongside prehistoric skeletons. And many of the drugs that are now illicit or illegal have been used for thousands of years, actually. But we do have different forms, semi-synthetics, more powerful forms right now that are killing people. But humans have forever wanted to feel better. This is a nerdy slide, so I apologize. But what I do want to talk about here is that, like, why do people use drugs? Why are we trying to feel better? And we're wired for this, right? So we are driven by this desire to survive. So food, water, sex, nurturing, those are things are all required for our species to survive. So our brains are set up that way. So we're wired to continue to sustain activities that are intended to sustain our lives, to promote our species, right? And so things that feel good, things that give us pleasure, those are reinforced behaviors so that we repeat them. Like we say, wow, that felt good. I'm going to do that again. Wow, there's also messengers in our brain that will say, wow, I touched that hot stove. That felt bad. I shouldn't do that again. And this is so that we continue to survive. And we have these natural opioids. They're called endorphins, right? You get that endorphin rush. And these are the things, these are the messengers that carry out the directives on what we should do. So, and all of these brain regions play a role in what happens when somebody is
That's
facing
why I asked
addiction.
what his
So
fellow would go
there's
through.
this
It's
dopamine
Mexican and Japanese.
reward system, and I do hear some background noise, so maybe somebody can mute themselves. But um, there's a dopamine reward system I want to talk about, and I'm just going to break it down really simplistically. When I talk about this, I've delivered a talk where we talk about lived experience with one of my navigators, and we really relate it to what is going on. So I apologize if this is oversimplistic, but I'm just really trying to drive the point home of what this can look like. So I'm going to start with a strawberry. I can tell you, I live in northeastern rural California, and the strawberries here are amazing. They're super delicious. They're the ones that I can get from the farm stands. They're juicy, they're yummy, right? And so I can tell you that when I eat one of these strawberries that I can get at one of the roadside stands, the dopamine is just surges. Like this makes me feel really good. I say, wow, that was amazing. It tasted good. It was the right consistency. Everything, it was nice and cool. It just makes me feel really good, right? So my dopamine is surging. So that makes me happy. I feel really happy. I love that strawberry. Let's think of it from like the perspective of a gumball machine. Like, so maybe this is a strawberry dispensing machine in my community. And so I think, wow, there's a whole bunch of these, and I could twist this. I put a quarter and I twist this and I get something that makes me feel really good. That's awesome. That increases my dopamine because there's a whole bunch of it, right? So I feel really good. There's a supply. I can keep going back and getting more because I really like feeling good, right? Who doesn't? Makes me happy. So, but then there's no more, right? So this is when this is wah wah, like no more strawberries, no more gumballs. And what do I feel? Well, my dopamine goes down, right? The parts of my brain that say, "Hey, you should have that. You should have more because that made you feel really good." Now the gumball machine is empty, and so I feel bad. And so what do I want to do? I want to get more gumballs. I want to get more strawberries. I want to figure out a way to feel good again because my body, the messengers in my brain are telling me I need that to survive. That's a good thing. That's something that I should do more of, right? So this is what we call the lizard brain. It's really our instincts to for survival so that we do things that further our lives and our species. And so it goes in a cycle like this. So you get stuck in this cycle of trying to find the things that make you feel better. And so we know that there's this cycle that people experience. So there's the part, that makes you feel good. If you take it to heroin or methamphetamine, you feel really good. This is something that makes you feel better. And then what happens is your system gets hijacked by this. So let's say there's a thermostat and you have your normal thermostat. Like for me, yeah, if I eat a strawberry, I feel better. But then I start using, let's say I used methamphetamine or cocaine, and I use this over time. You can get into this cycle now where you reset your thermostat, right? So you are seeking that, you start using and you say, that felt good. Your brain is telling you to use more. And then when you don't use it, you go through withdrawal or you feel bad. And so this hijacks your system and you reset your thermostat. So you need something more to feel good. And suddenly it's not the part of your brain that usually is that executive functioning part. This is just going on in the background. And like Ken was saying, he just couldn't figure out, it's like he knew that he didn't want to use, he knew that this wasn't going well, but he had this compulsion to continue to use. And that it's like a highway in your brain that, where these messengers are just working overtime and telling you you need more, you need more. It's very difficult to overcome that. I also don't want to ignore the fact that there's sometimes that people's brains have, there's higher risk for becoming dependent on a substance. And so, yes, there's something to say for, of course, coping, right? Stress intolerance, and we are all wired a little differently there. There's trauma, there's PTSD. So many of us have experienced really severe trauma. And then there's, of course, adverse childhood events. I think almost everybody has some adverse childhood event, and some have many more than others, including poverty and abuse. And age of onset, when did people start using? Genetics can play a role. We're learning more about epigenetics. And you know what? Just to say it, it just feels good. Like I said, there's just some people who started using because it felt good and they wanted to feel better. And then I want to bring this up as well because I think a lot of us, and this was ingrained in my brain early on, is that people use drugs because they want to have this, positive experience. It elevated their mood. It made them feel good. And then they were just using, then they came back down to normal, right? And they use again to feel better. And you can get into the cycle. And then this is where that thermostat can get reset. So many of the patients that I am treating will tell me, I don't even feel good anymore. Ken mentioned it in his story, in the story he was telling, where people are looking to feel good. They want to feel high, but so often they're just using to feel normal. And so you go through this cycle where so many of my patients say, I'm just trying to feel normal because I feel so terrible when I don't use. How do I get out of this? And they experience withdrawal, and it's really hard to get through that. And maybe they do get through withdrawal. Maybe they do get there. And then there's a life stressor that can trigger their dopamine to go down again, right? And then that's a trigger in their brain to use again. It's this cycle that keeps going. And so there's these implications because that again, that thermostat is set at a different level. And often when people return to use, they're using high amounts. And this does put them, of course, at risk for overdose. And so often you hear this person was doing great and then they overdosed. I thought they were doing well. And I am sure that they were. I'm sure that they were doing well. But sometimes these life stressors take hold, and one use, can, especially when people have lost tolerance, can cause death. So a change I made in my practice was seeing opioid use disorder as another disease, a brain disease that I can treat. And that was honestly that developing tools in the toolkit to help people. And when we compare opioid use disorder to diabetes or hypertension, to high blood pressure, we know that it's biologically mediated. We know that in our brains, we know that there's these pathways, these messengers working and telling us we should feel better and we should use again. It's psychologically mediated, socially mediated. There's a lot of exposure in different social environments to drugs. Lifestyle changes definitely help, but the symptoms may be relapsing and remitting. People may crave at different times in their life, depending on circumstances. And sometimes medications may be necessary for life, sometimes not, but sometimes medications are necessary for life. And so when we move substance use disorders or opioid use disorder into this space, so much makes more sense. I can tell you that the simple shift in my brain was that addiction's not a moral failing. It's a treatable chronic medical condition. And for me, the biggest thing, and I know Ken alluded to this, but it's treatable. People get better. People out there, there's friends and family who have had substance use disorders who actually are in this really great place right now where they are, like Ken is an author, an award-winning author now. People recover. People do recover. And this made a really big difference in my life. For years and years and years, I was counseling people, hey, just stop using. Like Ken said it, it was hard to stop using. And I just said, stop using, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, toe the line here. And what I didn't realize, particularly for opioid use disorder, is that that wasn't helping, that people were returning to use, that people were experiencing things where they would use again and overdose and face death. I was doing something and recommending something that works for only about 1 in 10 people, because you can see that when people stop using opioids without medications, that at first they're able to not use, but within 30 days, if you take this out further than 30 days, it goes to about 1 in 10 who is able to maintain abstinence from opioids when they're not treated with medications. So why on earth was I recommending and doing something that did not work for the majority? And then I also have to recognize that fentanyl's been around for a long time. Fentanyl's been around from the 70s. People were just choosing not to use this. Maybe there's a lot of reasons, but fentanyl use has increased for a lot of different factors, but coincided when we stopped prescribing opioids, became cheap, available, and and we have to recognize every use can kill. Every community needs a crisis plan. So not something where we kick the can down the road, where we say that this is something that we can deal with later. We need emergency crisis plans right now to help people find a way out to keep people from dying. And medication is treatment. I don't find that this is talked about quite enough. Medication is treatment. It's very confusing when you go there out there and look at treatment. I work in the emergency department, I work in addiction psychiatry, and we do a lot of counseling. We work on a lot of social factors. We try to get people housing. There's a lot of components that go in here, but we have to make sure that we are centering that medication is treatment. And why do I say that? Because it saves lives. So if you look again, this is a little bit nerdy, but if we look at just the general population of death rates, like dying from any cause, and we look at the general population, and then we look at the risk of dying for a person with opioid use disorder who's not getting medication-based treatment, their risk of dying is more than 6 times that of the general population, right? Really high risk from dying, and this is death from any cause. But when we start people on treatment, and this includes methadone and buprenorphine, we more than cut that risk in half of dying from any cause. This is a really big deal. I do a lot of things in my emergency department that, I give a lot of different medications that have much less impact than giving medications for opioid use disorder. So this is something that in every facet of medication or every facet of medicine we should be talking about. There's a lot when we're all on the same page, it makes a big difference. If somebody has diabetes, we don't question if they go onto medications for their diabetes. We understand that's really important. If somebody has really high blood pressure, we don't question that they need medications for their high blood pressure. We do recommend lifestyle changes, all sorts of other things, exercise, decreasing their salt intake, decreasing carbohydrates. But we give them medication because we know that this saves their life. I don't have many other things I can talk about in medicine where it makes this massive of a difference. So we all need to be talking about medications and encouraging people to access medications. And I am the biggest fan of naloxone. I have it on my backpack. I get questioned about it in the airport all the time because I carry it on my person. I have made it available in my hospitals. Very easy because we have it in medication carts. That's not quick enough sometimes. So we need naloxone everywhere because people cannot recover if they are dead. We need naloxone everywhere as accessible as possible. And I am such a believer in that we have done a distribution model through emergency departments in California, and emergency departments in California have given, I think we're close to 1 million doses of naloxone out by just being able to hand it to people, give it to them to put in their backpacks. I don't need to prescribe it. I give out so much naloxone, but I will tell you that is not a treatment for opioid use disorder. So we do need to give people a pathway out as well. So naloxone by itself is not enough. We are keeping people alive. We know this has made a massive impact on decreasing overdose deaths, but we now need to move towards getting people a way out, making sure they are offered and have access to medications. I'm going to talk methadone. I am a huge fan of, and I start people on methadone. It is hard for some people to access, though some people it's really easy. So please initiate people on methadone, give them choice. I'm going to talk about buprenorphine because often people don't know very much about buprenorphine. And I spent 17 years of my career not knowing very much about buprenorphine. And I know it's a terrible name, right? There's a P before an R. It's a big, long name. Many people can't say it. So you can just call it bupe or boop. It's fine. But this is something that is really important to give people access to because I'm a PA. I have a DEA license. I can prescribe this medication just like I would codeine, right? So if you can prescribe controlled substances, you can prescribe this medication. So I know that we need to help, we need to have massive volume to get people out of opioid use disorder. We need to create access now. How can we do that? This medication is something that primary care can prescribe, that anybody who has a DEA license that can prescribe Schedule 3 medications can prescribe this. So that's why I'm going to talk about this. And we have it in many different forms. It can a little pill that dissolves in your mouth, a strip that dissolves in your mouth, and injectables, which I've become a really big fan of. And I do have to say, I was taught in school that opioid withdrawal was not an emergency. How is it not an emergency? Minutes matter. We know that when somebody is going through withdrawal, maybe they make a choice and they say, I want to stop using. Maybe they run out and are just really dope sick. They're really sick. What does that look like? And you can see pretty quickly they start experiencing a lot of anxiety, muscle aches, vomiting. They feel like the worst flu in their life. They feel like they're going to die. And if we can intervene at that time with medication that rapidly makes them feel better, we can make a difference in their life. That's why this has to be so accessible. We all have to be on the same page because minutes do matter. And when we get somebody on medications for opioid use disorder, it simply makes them feel normal. They can find, we've talked about this cycle of, in terms of addiction and how people are often using to feel normal, right? But we can give them medication, a medication that doesn't make them stop breathing, a medication that blocks the other opioids, that will make it so they don't overdose and die. So we know that this medication saves lives, so we need to make it available. And not just for a month, but sometimes people need treatment for a couple years, sometimes for the rest of their life. And it's just what people need. There's no arbitrary time limits here. Buprenorphine keeps people in treatment, and that treatment gets them all of the help they need so that they can rebuild their lives. So there's no arbitrary time limits here. We don't put somebody on it and then suggest they come off of it right away. It's very patient-centered care. We want to allow people choice and give them good advice in terms of how long that it's helpful to take buprenorphine. And so all I can say is we know that buprenorphine saves lives, and we know that being out of treatment was associated with a markedly increased risk of death. So it's a very strong protective factor against dying. Now, one thing I'm gonna touch on here is, and Ken touched on this, we need to open this up so that people know they can talk to us. I will say, and I will own this, in emergency medicine, in primary care, I've worked in a lot of different settings. We didn't always make it comfortable for people to talk to us about drugs. So we have to advertise it. I can tell you, you can talk to me about anything. You don't need to want treatment. You can talk to me about, I can help you keep safe from dying, from getting an infectious disease. You can talk to me about drugs. I will talk to you about any drug any day. My patients teach me about some drugs that I didn't know about. And then I do my work to do, just like any other medical problem, to provide some treatment or access to treatment, or just talk to them about how they can decrease their risk so that they continue to live the life that they want to live. But we have to advertise this because unfortunately we've done harm. We have made it so people can't talk to us because we've treated them poorly when they do courageously disclose their use disorder to us. So I wear this pin. I have these pins. If we were all in person right now, I'd try to give you these pins, but we're really trying to create a space where people know they can talk to us about drugs. And I will tell you, the heroes of the story in California are our substance use navigators. And I hope if you're here, I am giving you a big, warm hug because I know that navigators make a massive difference for patients. So we funded more than 500 substance use navigators across California as like startup funds so that people could see their benefit. I just wrote a paper that's getting published that says our substance use navigators decrease readmissions to hospitals, like so people don't need to come back and finish treatment because they get the treatment they need when our substance use navigator is there, because they are encouraging people to stay and get treatment. They double a person's likelihood of getting the medications they need and deserve. They triple the likelihood that a person will get follow-up care. Our navigators often have lived history and are in professional positions embedded in medical teams, and they make a massive difference in getting people to care. So if you don't know who they are in your community, find them. They are the heroes doing this work. I just have to give a shout out to the substance use navigators at Marshall. This is Eric Hill, who's the first substance use navigator, Carrie Herbert, who's the current one. I also have Courtney, and they advertise what we're doing. We have a sign in the waiting room that says, hey, do you need help? We can help you. Carrie wears this t-shirt. You need help with your drug use? Talk to me. Sometimes she forgets she's wearing it and people say, I need to talk to you. But and I will tell you, the nurses in my emergency department will tell you that this is the most important, the best work they've ever done, because we're getting the word out there. And sometimes just being kind makes a difference. Ken can remember the faces, the people who was kind to him. We need to make it so that there's so many people kind to people who use drugs that it doesn't become an anomaly, that it is just the standard of care. And this is incredibly important. And when we do this in the model of care that we've been doing at Bridge, people want help. There is also a false narrative that people don't want medications, that people don't want to help. And that is simply not true. It is how it is offered. And when it's offered in a kind, compassionate, scientific way too, right? We're gonna give you the kind of treatment I'd want for my sister or my brother. Then that is when people often accept the medications that would stand to save their lives. So what I'm telling you is just referring somebody to go out there, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, find somebody who will help them. That is not an adequate crisis response. We wouldn't do that for any other crisis. We should not do that now. So what I'm asking you, and this is personal, is this is my sister. She died from the effects of drugs more than 10 years ago. We are creating the system that you would want your sister to access. It's meaningful. And think of that in everything you do. Think of what your family member would want, because that is what we're creating in California and what we're trying to influence across the country, so that we have a system of care that we're proud of, that our family members can access. So I really appreciate hearing Ken's story. That is that is the work that I will do until I die, to create access to care so people have a chance and people can live the lives that they want to live. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariana. So let me just start with one comment from one of the members of our audience. It says, Ken and Ariana are real heroes. And I just want to give that to both of you. I think that's just really important. And I think everybody here clearly appreciates both the heart and the knowledge and the courage, the courage that it takes to take this on as life's work and make this what you do now, for both of you. And it's real heroes work. You're doing heavy lifting, and thank you from all of us. Let's get going on some of the questions. And so Ken, you could maybe come back on camera if you don't mind. So first, just a real simple question that, Ariana, this is really for you. Where can our audience get Bridge clothes and Bridge buttons?
Bridge buttons. Oh, that's a good question. So I have some Bridge stickers I'll be giving out at various conferences I'm attending. But yeah, that's probably a good shout out that we should create a way for people to get more access. I always bring them with me, so that people can advertise this. There are some really great people who have buttons like this on I'm trying to think of the name, Etsy. Etsy has, if you look up, you can talk to me about drugs. Etsy has some people who sell these buttons as well. So that's where we got our first ones before we started creating our own.
That's terrific. And I guess maybe you're going to have to put something on your website for bridge wear. So since Ken's story is primarily about meth, and Ariana, you didn't really talk a lot about meth, I'd like, Ariana, since I know you do know a lot about meth, maybe you could talk a little bit about what we know as some of the better models for addressing meth. And then Ken, I'd like to have your thoughts, because from the user side, there's got to be two different perspectives of what works with meth and why it does or doesn't work. So Ariana, why don't you start, and then Ken will go over to you.
Sure. If you go to bridgetotreatment.org, we actually have a guide on what you can do to help somebody who's trying to stop using methamphetamine, and also to decrease the harms that they face. So I do two things, just to speak of, and if I'm honest, my sister died from the effects of meth. I'm very deeply invested in finding pathways to care for people. One thing, and so often I've heard people say, yeah, there's something for alcohol use disorder, opioid use disorder, what can I do for meth? So to keep it really simple, there's two things I do. One is I offer a chill pack. So I tell people, this is your, to help prevent or treat early psychosis. I will give people antipsychotics. I will also there's risk for stroke, make sure I address their blood pressure and their other medical issues. And I will give medications that help people chill out. So get sleep at night. We know that one of the major risk factors with methamphetamine use is lack of sleep, and we think that that actually leads to more psychosis. So we try to help people find ways and places that they can sleep comfortably. A lot of people are using meth because they're experiencing homelessness and they need to stay awake, and it's sort of part of it. So trying to find people a place where they can rest can make a massive difference in their life. So I have a chill pack, and then to pair that with sleep, wherever that may be, a comfortable sleep. And then I have a kick pack that I give. And the kick pack is actually you often experience really bad depression when you stop using. So I give a rapid acting antidepressant for about a week to help people be able to recover and return to normal activities sooner. And I do this, I treat in addiction psychiatry as well. So I offer chill packs when people are still using and kick packs when people are working on quitting. So, but yeah, I'd love to hear from you, Ken.
Um, I wish I had known about the chill packs and the kick packs because those were never offered to me. I will say that um, you're right about lack of sleep, and that there's a lot of people on the streets who they're afraid to go to sleep because you can't protect yourself when you're asleep. You don't know what's going to happen to you while you're asleep. So if you're not surrounded by people you trust, which is rare, I know I seriously know people who believed that they could always stay awake, which is crazy. That's insane. You can't do that. And there is a direct link between lack of sleep and psychosis. Meth causes psychosis, but like a lot of times I just knew like this is because this person has been up for 2 weeks, you know. Um, I know I'm actually taking a medication right now. That my psychiatrist has me on a medication that is supposed to curb the cravings for methamphetamine. It's difficult to prove I'm negative. Like I don't know that it's working, but I know that I'm still clean and sober. So I that um, I just also want to say the thing about meth withdrawal. Um, a lot of people say there really isn't withdrawal from meth the same way there is with heroin, and that's true. It's not the same at all. Um, but we're typically very hungry, very sleepy, um, and also like the depression you said is real. There's a lot of times that I would become suicidally depressed, and so I got high just to not be that depressed because I could have killed myself. And so, in a strange way, there were times when meth might have saved my life.
Yeah, I forgot to mention also the food part. It's like meeting human needs, right? Initially, and it is so important. Thank you for that, Ken. And I will admit, I wear that button. You can talk to me about drugs. So a lot of my patients have taught me a lot of this, and really demanded better care, which I'm pretty proud of our methamphetamine emergency intervention. And Ken, I also prescribe medications for craving. And often you're right, it's like the double negative. Is it working? Well, I'm doing okay, so maybe it is working. But there are a few studies out there that show that we can decrease craving.
So there's a really good question here. Do either of you have a good soundbite answer that I can say to the officers and unfortunately some of the nurses at the large county jail I work at when they make comments about users choosing their drug consumption and making choices that land them in jail?
One thing that I used to do in a soundbite is I used to just say that person could be my sister. Um, and so that was one way that I humanized, because I think above all, we first need to make people human. And so that's not everybody's story. I do not wish that on anybody, but but I think humanizing that person in a soundbite in a minute can make a big difference. And then for me, if you're if you're talking about drugs, like I often say, well, humans have always used drugs. It's just a different kind of brand that's out there right now that we need to address. So those are just two quick things that I can think of. Ken, you might have something better.
Unfortunately, I don't. Like, not a soundbite answer. I've been on the receiving end. I've been in and out of county jail more times. Like, literally, I cannot count the number of times I've been in and out of county jail, sometimes for a couple of days and sometimes for a few months. And the aggregate total is years. Um, so I've heard those, I've heard what people say. Um, but I've also had the experience of sheriffs pulling me aside and expressing concern and saying that, I mean, to the best, they have no training in this, but to the best of their ability, they're trying to say, you know, try to make a change. You know what I mean? And so I've had both experiences, and I don't know what to say to people. I think some of it is um just fatigue. When you see the worst possible behavior in people, it's hard to continue to muster compassion. But at the same time, yeah, it could be your nephew, it could be your son, it could be your sister. Yeah.
One thing we did, Ken, to back that, like just education. So we did find that too. I tell often like a tale of two probation officers, and that's like honestly why we're here talking to everybody is there was one probation officer who literally drove somebody to our clinic and he told him, "Hey, I'm really worried about you. I think you should need to get on some medications," and supported it. And that person did great. There's another probation officer who just didn't have the same education and sort of training and said, "Oh, you shouldn't take that stuff. You're not really in recovery if you're taking medications." And so that person always questioned medications and I think felt shame for taking them. So definitely that like I call it priming is letting people know that it's a good thing to take medications. And I am telling you, the ones who have this one probation officer, they just do great. And that probation officer has done a wonderful job of getting people to treatment, encouraging them to stay in it, and really and I don't. The other one may just not have that education. So I think that's why we're here. We're talking to people. I as often as I can try to talk to people who may not necessarily attend these webinars, right? I try to talk to people who may not have heard this before.
I think both of you just made some really important comments. And hopefully the people who are part of this audience will be able at different times in their lives to think about how to influence the people around them to say more supportive things, to say things that offer hope and possibility instead of are shaming and kind of giving it more stigma. Stigma is one of the things that's such a big roadblock in either doing this work because you're a caregiver or being somebody who needs help. I mean, just getting over the stigma is such a big deal. And that kind of leads me to ask a little bit about, so what are some of the ways in which we could get family and community members involved? What do you think? Let's start with Al-Anon. Is that helpful for families where there've been impacted family members with addiction? Al-Anon or other kinds of programs like that? Yeah, Ken, why don't you start and then we'll go to Ariana.
So I'm an only child, and both of my parents have passed away, and it's a small mercy, but they never saw the worst of my addiction. Thank goodness. I I don't know. That's not the life they wanted for me, you know. And so I'm grateful for that. So I don't, and like I said, I'm an only child, so I don't know firsthand the effect of Al-Anon, but I have a lot of friends who are actually in programs like that. And I guess the thing is, it's important to know that you can be there to help, but you cannot fix anybody. And you can't do more for that person than that person can do for themselves. I think addiction is this weird thing where it is not a moral failing, but at the same time, and it is a disease, but at the same time, we do have choices and we are responsible for the choices that we make, and that recovery requires work. And so you can either do that work or not, but and that's not, and nobody else can make you do anything. But I think I think it is important to not attach a moral judgment to it, but at the same time, for the addict to take responsibility for the things that we can take responsibility for. It's like people with diabetes. They have a disease that maybe isn't their fault, but their dietary choices now are up to them.
Yeah, that's some of the talk we do on neurobiology of addiction is that, and people, with lived history have talked about it as a disease of choice. There's choices that are made as well. I would say one thing I've recognized a lot of my patients who talk to me, and something I think happened with my sister, is there's community, right? So, Ken, I'm sure when you were on the street, there's a community there, for better, for worse, there's community. And people, I think humans really seek community. That's also part of our survival, is community. And so I think friends and family members of people who use drugs also, it's helpful to have community. I appreciate now having a different understanding of addiction than when my sister was alive. And so one thing that I've recognized, and to be honest, the inspiration for substance use navigators is giving people some community in some of the places where they land, where they're most vulnerable, and then introduction into community. So I say community a lot because I think we need to create supportive communities for people, in wherever they're at, healthy communities, so that friends and family have community, so that people who use drugs have community. I actually, a lot of people go to different group meetings. One I can appreciate that is a community of people who are still using, but they're looking to like make a difference and maybe not die, maybe have some healthier choices, and they need community too. So I guess that is, I think, creating those spaces for people wherever they're at, and making sure that that it's done in a way that gives them access to care and doesn't shame them, and recognizes that there's choices made, and of course having boundaries and things like that is helpful. But I just think having healthy communities is important.
Yeah, I know that we're kind of far afield from the question about family and the support family can get. But just to what Dr. Campbell just said, what you said is entirely true for me. That a lot of it's so weird to say this, but addiction for me, a lot of it was fueled by the desire for connection. Um, and it's ironic because, like when I drank for the first time, I was able to talk to people. When I used drugs, I was able to have courage, and I could do things with people, and I felt included and a part of something, and so that was part of the high. But that worked so well that I drove away every person that loved me, and I destroyed every relationship in my life. And so it's ironic that the thing I do to cure loneliness creates such deep and profound alienation and loneliness. And I think that one of the best tools in recovery for me has been finding community, and being a part of that community. I don't think I could be clean and sober without that.
There's a number of people in the listening audience that are saying exactly that. And I think that that's really, really important. So, human connection is so important for us addicts in connection in recovery. Uh, that's one of the statements. There's somebody else who's saying, I'm not a person. I'm a person who's not just a user. I am also a spouse, a parent, a part of a lot of things. And so I think what you're saying here is something that is so tremendously important. It's not just about the medications. It's not just about the stepping over people in the street. It's remembering that we have some ability to belong to each other, and that can be a very curing thing, a very helpful thing, a very supportive thing. So thank you for going into that space. That's we can't ever forget that. That's a really important space that we have to just keep bringing back to ourselves. There was a really good question a little while back about who regulates methadone. So I just want to really quickly answer that. So methadone is regulated federally, and there's a number of regulations around its safety and around its use and distribution. But it can also be regulated by the states, and states can enforce even stricter regulations than the feds do. So hopefully that puts that thought to bed for a minute. Let me also get back to the questions from the audience again, which have disappeared from my screen, unfortunately. Oh, here they go. Okay. Oh, thank you. This is one of the best presentations I've attended. Thanks for sharing your stories. Making the issues human and part of daily lives is cathartic for individuals in order to embrace recovery. What about one really good thing that somebody just brought up, and I see, oh, um, any, uh, as a follow-up, can you bring up a bit about senior drug use, since there seems to be a stereotype that drugs are a young person's problem? So let's talk a little bit about substance use across the age spans. Maybe Ken, you could start with what you've observed, and then Ariana, you could follow up.
Well, I started when I was younger, but I'm now almost 60 years old, and most all of my time on the streets I was in my 50s. But I didn't know that. I was I legitimately thought, I thought I was in my 30s. I did not think about my age at all. And The thing is, I work, I'm a lived experience researcher with the UC San Diego Homelessness Hub. And one of the projects we're doing is on aging. And it's a rapidly growing population among the unhoused community. And a lot of them are people who are just aging on the streets. And so their addiction is just persisting into old age. And it's heartbreaking, because there's a point at which people really do need assistance and care, but on the streets, how are you going to get that? And at the same time, you see communities of unhoused people who try to help the infirm and the elderly. They do their best to help. That's the thing about unhoused people, is I don't think people see the communities that get formed, the relationships that get formed. And it's truly people who are doing their best to support one another. But like I said before, sometimes their best is not very good.
Ariana?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, if you think about the timing of when we were exposing people to a ton of opioids, it's on the timeline where there's a lot of people out there with opioid use disorder right now. And as well as stimulant use disorder, often when people are older too, they are craving feeling better. And there's a lot of different factors that go into people feeling alone or lacking community. And so I would just say having those same pathways out, and actually talking to people realistically about it, and keeping those open channels. But there is a lot of, I don't like to rest in the word stigma, because it's so much more than that. There's discrimination. There's a lot of other factors going on, but certainly, uh, I know that there's been some legislation recently where people are talking about better coverage for some of our seniors who need substance use disorder treatment. There's also co-occurring, there's a lot of kind of scarier illnesses we see sometimes in our older population who are using drugs. So like one thing that we often haven't thought about is like blood pressure control if somebody is using methamphetamine to decrease their risk of stroke, and all of these other things. So I think we need to recognize that we do need to think about disease processes, and we just need to know that people that we expose to this massive amount of opioids are older now. From the peak, we're 13 years later. So that this is something that we all need to know, and we're including in a lot of our educational components and things like that.
So let's talk a little bit about the treatment side of things. One question to you, Frank or Ken, is whether you think that there will come a time when you can stop using the medications that you're using. And then back over to Ariana to talk a little bit about what any concerns might be, or what the state of our knowledge is with respect to long-term use of medication for treatment. So Ken?
So what I'm taking is not analogous to methadone or Suboxone or anything like that. It doesn't. It's just these are just medications that are supposed to help reduce the cravings, but they don't have any other like sort of mood or mind altering effect. And with my psychiatrist, yes, the plan, like the intention is that I will get off it, that I will not need to. I guess kind of picking up a little bit on what Dr. Campbell was saying, the way my psychiatrist explains it to me is that we just need to give the brain time to heal. That exposure to crystal meth, um, you know, makes the damage more severe, but the brain is plastic. It can heal. So the longer I stay away from crystal meth, the more my brain heals. And then, the executive functioning returns. I think of crystal meth as a addiction too, but my addiction is a disease where the executive functioning of my brain is just short circuited. I can know something is the wrong thing to do and still do it as I'm telling myself, don't do this. So, I need to do something to help my brain to heal, and this gives me the time to heal.
Can you put that so well? It is. It's giving brain healing time. And I will tell you, I have some people I treat who overdosed 20 times. They almost died, right? And so they've just said, hey, is it a problem if I'm on this medication the rest of my life? I have my family back, I have a house, I have a job. I just don't want to risk it. And I say, yeah, it's fine. Like you can, as long as you need. And then I have people who really do just, for various reasons want to get off the medications. And we figure out a safe path to that. We decrease and this is for anything because I do treat different use disorders and like I give naltrexone for alcohol use disorder or topiramate. I always say I have something for everybody in terms of, and it's not all medications. We do contingency management. It's just wherever we know can help people at the time, that's what we lean into. And then it's very person centered. It's just like I do have people with type 2 diabetes who got off of medications, made all these major lifestyle changes, and they don't need medications anymore. And so we decrease it, make sure they're okay, and then they know that they also have open access to return. Often for my folks who like I had somebody who I've had some people who were for various reasons they wanted to get off of all the medications, and I just say, here's this to have on hand should things get weird or funky or you have craving. And I call it the pill in the pocket approach. So if there's, we know that that trigger can happen. So if that happens, you already have some here, and then just, we'll get you back in, no problem. We recognize that that is part of the disease. To not recognize that is a problem. It's just like if any other thing that we treat, if we said, like your blood sugar is now always going to be perfect because we treated you once. It's not representative of people's lives. So I think just bringing it to that zone and making sure that people have access. And then I always have like a safety approach of here, you have access to this now, and then you can make an appointment with me.
Those are really helpful answers. And I think maybe for people who are working in the field, especially just to remember that kind of longer term trajectory and ways to connect with people over that long term, and understanding that not everybody's going to go there, but some will. And this is just, chronic disease is chronic disease. And that's why they call it chronic, right?
I was going to mention, kind of based on this, like how long do people need to be in treatment, returning to treatment? We are currently building something called California Bridge Connect. We're building like a hotline so that people have easy access. Because, yeah, not everybody has my phone number. I actually do often. I give my phone number to my patients because I've had people call me from jail. But because I want people to have, I've had people call me from residential treatment when they weren't being allowed to get medications, and I've made sure people had access. But you shouldn't have to know Ariana Campbell. So we're creating a line so you don't have to have an insider. You can simply call a phone line and get easy access to treatment. So just so you know, that's coming. We're creating it, building it right now, and it should be in California counties and communities over the next. We're doing a rollout over the next 2 years, and I think if you do your own secret shopper in your community and like, what is it like to try to get treatment? There are mixed messages out there. So we want this to be consistent messaging and people know you're welcome back in. You're welcome in too. Like, please, like we welcome you into this community, wherever you're at. So that's the whole idea.
So one of the things that's coming up a lot in the audience questions are questions about meth and meth treatment, and Ken, your story is very much about meth, and I know that we're in a situation right now where there is a treatment that is viable with respect to opioids, that's wonderful, and that's a great step forward, and we're learning a lot from it that's applicable across a lot of substance use disorder uh, sort of use cases. But let's talk for just a moment. Do you think that meth is growing as a problem? And any thoughts about that? Um, Ken, start with you, and then let's go to Ariana.
Um, so my situation is a little bit different. I live in San Diego, and the U.S.-Mexico border here is the point of entry for a lot of crystal meth. So San Diego is a place where you can get high quality crystal meth at much cheaper prices than you can get in other parts of the country. So meth it's a scourge. It's yeah. But I can't speak to, is it growing? I don't know national trends at all. And then the other thing too is I haven't been on the streets for a few years, so I don't know what's happening. I do know just from talking to friends who I still have relationships with people I knew from the streets. Um, I know that black tar heroin is very hard to get, and it didn't used to be. And fentanyl is easy to get, and it didn't used to be. But when it comes to crystal meth, I don't know. Like I don't even I've heard of xylazine. I don't know if that's affected San Diego yet or not.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think this is the question a lot of us are asking who are deeply care, of course. I don't think anybody's really, like I said, 15% of the population has a substance use disorder. We actually think it's much higher. So because, we keep asking, who's out there who needs treatment, and we haven't necessarily created the spaces for people to get treatment. I didn't mention, but very few people compared to how many people have a substance use disorder actually get treatment. And if that was like any other medical issue, we would be questioning more why. Like, how do we make the kind of treatment that people want, that people can access, that people, what do people think treatment is? And I'm asking those questions, but we need to be asking that in a much bigger way. That's part of why we're developing this hotline, is to be able to get people to the treatment they want and need. It's very person-centered. I give methadone too in my emergency department. Like, I offer people, if people want naltrexone, there's all sorts, people do contingency management. And then I just wanted to mention that. And then to your point, Ken, in terms of drug supply and things like that, there are heroes in this work who are providing easy access to drug checking. Like, if we actually really want, we need informed consumers out there. And so people know what's in the drugs that they're consuming, and that's its own check. But drug checking has shown we don't have that much xylazine right now in California. There is medetomidine here, which is just, that's an adult, there's different adulterants, and we really should stay on top of this so people know what they can be exposed to and what their risks are. And the medetomidine is kind of some scary stuff that can be out there. So I'm also a big believer in drug checking.
So one of the other thoughts that was shared with us is San Diego has a higher methamphetamine overdose deaths in 2023 and 24 than fentanyl related deaths. And I'll mention that actually that's also true in California overall. That's been true for a few years. So I think this is one of those places where California, it could be leading the nation and doesn't want to. But we've got statistics, and we'll just put them out there. I'd be interested, and I'll have to think a little bit about how to find the stats across the rest of the country. Really good data is getting a little bit harder to access for various reasons that we'll go into, but we'll keep trying to stay abreast of that. And this series is not just about opioids, although we talk about overdose prevention and we talk about opioid related overdose prevention. It's not just about opioids. It's about all substance use disorder. Ariana.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, a friend, Jean Marie Perone, she's out in Pennsylvania, but she did some real time, like, well, drug checking when people experienced an overdose of what did you think you were using and what did you actually use. We need that kind of information everywhere. The kind of testing that we have in our emergency, we won't get data for a week or two, and that's unacceptable as well. So this is there's a high mortality out there. We need to be able to share with people, what it is that they were using, because people don't even know. So, but the majority of overdoses, even with methamphetamine, still involve fentanyl. It's still the big killer out there. So we have to pay attention and have naloxone everywhere, because even if there's medetomidine in it, if there was some fentanyl in it, then we could still reverse some of that with the fentanyl part of it with naloxone. So we still need to have naloxone out there everywhere. So that is just
So
my plea.
So with that last word, I want to just make sure that everyone has a moment to thank both Ken and Ariana for the incredible information, the insights, the humanity, the compassion. Just let us know how we can continue to support your overdose prevention efforts. And that means drop us a line. Here's the address. And keep in mind, in about a week, maybe just a little bit over that, we will have this webinar available on our website. You can share it with others, and we'll also be announcing the date of future webinars. Thank you so much to everybody who's part of our audience today, and we'll see you again next time.